obviously we talk a lot about AI on this podcast. I think like when we're looking at actual changes in technology in the startup space, it's so much about AI, and like AI can be a really powerful way of managing these costs, right? And so the other story, which I think is sort of like a good jumping off point and a good bit of a sort of read on the zeitgeist, is that a couple of days ago, Tobi Lütke, who is the founder and CEO of Shopify, put out a company-wide memo about the use of AI at Shopify. And I thought maybe I would just sort of read a couple of the highlights of this, and we could sort of talk about, how things are changing because of the availability of these tools, and how you should be thinking about this in your startup. So Toby listed 5 expectations of Shopify employees. The first is using AI effectively is now a fundamental expectation of everyone at Shopify.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of people I interact with on a daily basis in my advisory work and fractional executive work who are still kind of reaching for AI last instead of reaching for AI first. And they're still a little like jittery about, well, what do I ask it? And, how can it really help in this situation? And it's a little bit shocking, actually. Even some people who think that it's a little bit like cheating, or it's lazy, or it's half-assed. Yeah, there really needs to be sort of this, as you're doing this kind of top-down mandate of like, go reach for the AI first. You need to learn how it works. Using it is not a cheat. And you need to get really, really good at it. You're good at using it, good at prompting it. I posted on LinkedIn this post about, hey, if you're still a little afraid of AI, you should really think about it as like this, one of the smartest people a friend who's very compliant. You can ask it for anything. If you give it good context and ask it for what you need, chances are it will know the answer and give you a really great response. And I thought this was a completely benign, banal observation. I thought it was one of the dumbest LinkedIn posts I have ever made. There's nothing controversial or value out of this post.
Oh, mate, you made so many dumb LinkedIn posts. What you're talking about?
This thing went viral. It went huge, tens of thousands of views, with many, many people commenting like, you must be joking. Please take down this post. This post is so misguided. This is disgusting. And like, people were completely incensed by me simply saying, hey, just think of it like a friend or a colleague, ask it what you need. And they were upset that I was anthropomorphizing it. I was oversimplifying that I called it one of the smartest people, it doesn't know everything. It lies, it hallucinates, and it doesn't know it. It's like, my God, like, relax. It was a simple metaphor to try to humanize the idea, to get people to try the thing. And I just think this is entrenched in a lot of legacy companies around the world. And so, if you're listening to this show, you're probably not one of these people, but certainly your colleagues might be, or, larger companies that you're dealing with might be in this boat. So it's a really good first point to lead with for the Spotify CEO.
I think there's a couple of things to break apart there. So yeah, first of all, what you're talking about is what I've started calling AI cope, right? There's this sense of like, people don't want AI to be able to change their jobs, right? And they're not comfortable with either the technology or the implications of the technology or whatever. And so, they go from like, wanting to push back against the hype, which is reasonable. There is a lot of hype. AI is not capable of everything that people say it is, but they go too far and they say, everything that people say AI can do that is, fundamentally going to change how things are done. I don't buy any of that, right? And, they'll reach for desperate examples to prove that AI isn't that clever. And, I call that AI cope. And it is a really dangerous thing to do, right? Because burying your head in the sand is not going to be the way to succeed. And Toby mentions that, in this point 1, he says, frankly, I don't think it's feasible to opt out of learning the skill of applying AI in your craft. You are welcome to try, but I want to be honest, I cannot see this working out. So, I think that's the point. He's like saying, no AI cope here, right? And more than that, using AI effectively is a fundamental expectation of everyone at Shopify. And so the second point I wanted to make about that is this is about learning, right? And I think that's something that's sort of changed a little bit, right? In this moment, is that a key part of everyone's job is really about going back and becoming a student and learning, because nobody knows how to use AI effectively out of the box, right? And that technology is constantly changing and evolving and improving. So even if you knew how to use AI effectively yesterday, it doesn't mean you know how to use it effectively today. And so, we sort of talk about the learning mindset and so on. I think that there's been an element of that, but it's been a bit lip service, right? Like, I don't think anyone really minded if people didn't invest in their learning as long as they could do their job well. But when there's this period of rapid change, learning becomes a core part of the job. And I think that is what Tobi is saying in this memo, is effectively learning how to use AI is part of your job expectation, right? So if you don't know how to use the tool, that's on you. You need to make sure that you do that well.
So his second point here is AI must be part of your GSD prototype phase. I assume it's get shit done.
I would assume so.
It's part of the prototyping phase.
This is an internal memo, so yeah, it's not explained.
That's right. So your project should be dominated by AI exploration. Prototypes are meant for learning and creating information. AI dramatically accelerates this process. You can learn to produce something that other teammates can look at, use, and reason about at a fraction of the time it used to take. So he's saying, stop talking about it, start prototyping it real quick with AI, and AI should be part of your prototyping phase.
Right. And this is, by the way, this is what I would call a mandate, right? So this part of the memo is a mandate. It's saying you must use AI as part of your prototyping phase, not you should, or it's a good idea. It says AI must be a part of your prototype phase. So again, what this is doing is with a, pretty strong bit of top-down pressure to say that, whether you think it's helpful or not, you have to show that you're doing this, right? This is how we do things now. And, this memo has been compared to Jeff Bezos's very famous API platform memo from the 2000s over at Amazon, where he basically told every team that they had to build an encapsulated service with an API that could be the only interface between their service and the rest of Amazon, right? And basically it's like, if you don't do that, you're fired. And there's a bit of that element here as well, right? It's like, I'm not asking, I'm telling you, you must use AI as part of your prototype phase because it is that powerful. So again, these things build on top of each other. You need to learn how to use it effectively, and then you must use it, especially in that prototyping phase.
Yeah, I mean, this is, to my mind, a bit of an extension of the first one, right? Which is you have to learn how to use AI in your craft. Well, one of the ways of using it in your craft is to prototype things rapidly, whether you're in product or engineering or marketing or sales or whatever. This is one of the ways that you need to learn how to use it well and rapidly. It's in my experience, people sort of reach for other things first for whatever reason still to this day. And yeah, I just, a quick prompt and it'll get you on your way. I'll admit, actually, I haven't done enough of some of this. There's v0.dev that,
there's heaps of them.
Yeah. And I need to get better at this actually. And so, there's a lot of vibe coding going on, a lot of prototyping going on, and it's just a lot easier now. We need to all get on top of this.
That's right. And that's the point of the mandate, right? Is it's uncomfortable. And so sometimes you just got to make people do things, right? And that is what Tobi is doing here. By all reputation, a very nice guy, but this is sort of the hard core of him where he's like, yes, you must do this. The word must, I think, is very deliberate. Okay, number 3. We will add AI usage questions to our performance and peer review questionnaire. So actually, I'll read the rest of this one because it's really interesting. And it touches on what we've already spoken about, Chris. Learning to use AI well is an unobvious skill. My sense is that a lot of people give up after writing a prompt and not getting the ideal thing back immediately. Learning to prompt and load context is important, and getting peers to provide feedback on how this is going will be valuable. So again, what we're saying is learning is now a core skill, right? We've said, thing 1 is we said you have to learn. It's an expectation. Thing 2 is we said, we want to show that we want to see that you're actually using this as a core part of the prototyping process. Thing 3 is saying your performance is going to be measured on this, right? We're going to add this to your peer feedback. So because learning it is not obvious, because it's not easy, because it's easy to give up, we're going to align the incentives. We're going to make this crystal clear. This is part of your job now. Learning this is part of your job, and your performance is going to be measured based on that.
I love the way you recap that because it is definitely building on itself, right? The first one is, hey, you should probably take a look at this. The second is, and you should definitely use it for this part of your job. And the third thing is, and we're going to make sure you're using it and learning in that. I guess we're going to put it in your performance review. And so this is really not a suggestion as just as a masterclass in how to roll things out in your company. If it's not in the performance reviews, it's not real. If you change the cultural values, but you don't change your performance review rubrics to reflect your cultural value change, that's not a change in cultural values. So yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so that's right. So those are the first 3. There are 5 points in this memo. And as you said, these 3 build on each other. Now, the next 2 are a little bit different, right? So the 4th one says, learning is self-directed, but share what you learned. So this one doesn't have as much of a hard edge, but I think is really important, again, that, there's this collective learning going on. When things are moving this quickly, it's not a question of, everyone, there's a manual that you follow and, there's a course that you do and you learn your AI skills and then off you go. We're all learning together. And the way that we accelerate the organizational learning is by not trapping every person's learnings in their silo, but aggressively sharing both, what works and what doesn't. And this is something that I'm implementing at the organization that I'm currently leading the engineering team for. Sharing is super important when we're, in a sense, pioneers, right? When we're sort of at that bleeding edge, figuring out what works and what doesn't. There is no rule book. We need to figure it out ourselves. The sharing is actually a core part of it.
Well, I mean, I slightly disagree that this is not related to the first three. What he's saying is, you need to go do this. You need to demonstrate you're doing it. We're going to measure you doing it. And guess what? We're not going to baby you and spoon feed you and give you professional development projects and courses to do it. You need to just go do it. You're not waiting for somebody to hand it to you. And so I think that it's all building on itself. It's saying you're going to need to go do it, and you're going to do it for yourself, and you're going to help your colleagues do it. Because, implied here is there is no courseware where you can, like, a moment in time, you go learn it, because it's still being figured out. It's changing all the time. And so, I think it's very much, it is sort of the how you're going to get better at it and how you're going to use it for prototyping and how you're going to get performance reviewed on it is by teaching yourself and teaching each other. The fifth bullet is, before asking for more headcount and resources, teams must demonstrate why they cannot get what they need done using AI. And so this is a really big statement, right? This is what we talked about in the last episode, which is maybe there's a little bit of shedding of staff going on, especially in customer support and whatever. But where the real opportunity for companies is to say, how do we scale and massively increase productivity by supercharging every employee with AI? And what he's saying is, we're not going to give you more headcount. These companies all naturally grow, naturally bloat, naturally add headcount. And before you add another head, figure out how to scale with AI. It's really powerful.
So I think this is powerful. This is the one that got the most newsworthiness, because I think the media have decided that, job losses or lowered employment is like the clickbait that works the most. I think this is happening formally and informally across the board, right? And this just makes sense, right? This is automation 101. This is not unique to AI. This is typical of any wave of productivity improvement of automation, right? You're like, oh, okay. So maybe now, regardless of whether we let go of existing people, we're going to be like, can the automation pick up the slack, right? Instead of hiring another bookkeeper, can we put it in Excel, right? So there's nothing new here, but it's a very pointy reminder that AI is a productivity tool that adds leverage to every employee you have. And sometimes you need to break out of that old habit of how we do things and say, okay, like, let's make sure we're getting maximum leverage out of the tools before we add the most expensive and failure-prone part of the whole system, which is more employees, more humans. Chris, there's something I wanted to do here, which is like, go through this again and think about how this applies in the context of startups, right? How you should be thinking of it as a founder. And I think there are a few here that are particularly salient. And, when we go back to that whole like tariff, the economy has a lot of uncertainty around it. This is where, as a startup founder, you can actually really come out ahead, because these mandates are really easy relative to a big organization when you are small and scrappy and getting started, right? So let's have a look at this. Number one, using AI effectively is now a fundamental expectation of everyone at your startup. If you're very early stage, everyone at your startup, well, that's you. You're looking in the mirror. It's a fundamental expectation you should have of yourself. It's a fundamental expectation of everyone on your team, right? That means that it's now a fundamental expectation to spend a significant amount of time learning. There are new tools coming out all the time. There are, advances in the quality of models. If you're not keeping up to date with that, then you're going to miss so many opportunities. You're going to miss opportunities to be more efficient. You're also going to miss opportunities to make your product better, right? Because you don't know what tools are out there that can really enhance your product and make it a kind of AI native tool. So, being a founder is a learning journey regardless, but now we're saying, okay, this is a skill you can't afford to skimp on. You need to put the time in. You need to move it up your priority stack and, sacrifice other things, because everything in time management is a prioritization trade-off exercise. This needs to move way the hell up, because if you don't, you're kind of flying blind into this new way of doing things.
Yeah, which brings us to the second point, right? Which is if you should be using AI to do your prototype phase. And so how many founders are there, Yaniv, in the world who are like ostensibly out there looking for a technical co-founder? Now with low code, no code tools, with these new AI generative tools, you should be able to generate quite a lot of functional prototype, of first version, of MVP, that can at least prove out your idea, can get some early traction, can put it in front of some people. And so this second point of it must be part of your prototyping phase, I would say it must be part of your MVP phase. Get something up and running, and waiting for that, that mythical technical co-founder is no longer a good enough excuse. Similarly, if you're a technical co-founder or a technical person, waiting for that marketer, waiting for that web developer to create the web page for you. I'm working with a team where the engineer generated a landing page for the app we're building. He literally gave it just a few words about what we're building, and it generated a roughly right, landing page pretty quickly. Now, I rewrote the whole damn thing, but it was at least something the engineer could have done to move the ball forward. And so, yeah, the second one of like AI should be part of your prototyping phase, should be part of your MVP and your early getting shit done phase for your startup.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree. You talked about the technical co-founder thing. I think effective use of AI and technology still requires somebody with a high level of technical skill to really build production systems. But those early stages, Chris, yeah, sure, like you can get a lot more done, right? This is an extension of the sort of the no-code revolution, which is not really a revolution, I suppose, but the no-code movement where you can get more done without having that deep technical expertise. 100% agree. But even if you do have a technical co-founder, they should be able to move way faster, especially in those early stages, because they are leveraging these tools. AI should be a standing agenda item. If you have co-founders, if you have a team, you need to be learning together, right? And again, you have an advantage over bigger companies in a lot of ways because you can learn and adapt much faster. But this is not something you do in a silo where you've got one person who does the AI learning or you're each doing your own thing. It's like, no, this is like a core part of how you're evolving your company. You need to share those learnings. You need to create lightweight processes or forums or whatever it is that you need to do to make sure that that learning is shared every day, every week, every month.
And, it's really popular to build in public these days. So, as you learn and as you build, I've seen a lot of these vanity posts where it's like, oh, I built my startup to whatever million ARR with, 2 people in a smell of an oily rag using these AI agents and whatever. I don't know how much of it is true, and I don't know how long that's going to last or how long
There's a lot of BS there.
People are going to tolerate it. But sharing in public with the fellow startup community and building in public can be helpful here as well.
Yeah, well, actually, you make a very good point, and something that I did want to mention is I think the idea of having learning communities beyond your own startup, especially if you're early stage, is increasingly important. I'm sure that there are a lot of, meetups and forums and so on happening. Consider joining one, consider creating one where there are other founders, other startups who you can share knowledge with, right? Like what's working for them, what's working for you. If you're worried about competition, make sure that those startups aren't in a competitive space to you, but you will all benefit, right? That rising tide will lift all boats if you're able to share that knowledge, what's working for you. So again, I think that extension of learning in a startup is try to engage with a broader community. The final one, I think, is in a sense the most obvious one for startups, right? Which is before asking for more headcount and resources, demonstrate why you can't get done what you need to get done using AI. And this is going back to, the 3-person unicorn idea that was mentioned first on this podcast, as you like to say, Chris. Whether you get there or not, the point is at a startup, you should always be slow to hire, right? You should always be slow to add that fixed high cost of an employee. But now it's like, wow, I do think at the early stages, you can get away for a lot longer with a really small team. And actually, especially if you do have a technical co-founder, Chris, or a technical lead, they can do a lot of the software building using these advanced tools without having to get a team, without having to outsource it or insource it or anything like that. They can kind of just, them and, a bunch of these tools can build quite a lot. And so the idea of having just the founding team or, just a couple of employees on top of the founding team until you reach a fair bit of traction, I think is more feasible than it used to be. So don't assume, even if you raise a round, right? You've raised your pre-seed, maybe even your seed round. You're like, oh, I'm going to go off and hire a bunch of people. Wait, stop and think. Is hiring people actually the right use of this capital? Is it necessary? And if it's not, then don't do it.
Yeah, obviously, being capital efficient, capital wise is key here. I just want to talk about the risks of overdoing it on this point, because everything you just said is well taken. Everything you said is correct. But there is a class of founder who raises money and then does not deploy it, is still pinching pennies, and is still shy about getting shit done, and doesn't understand that a big part of startups is momentum and about opportunity cost. And so don't ever take this advice as like, don't spend. It's about spending wisely, spending efficiently. And also, the other thing I want to say that's a bit of a counter argument to this, in my experience, AI only works if you know what questions to ask, and you ask very, very specific questions, good questions that often require the domain expert in the first place to ask. And so when I ask AI about all the things that I'm an expert on, I find most of its answers to be middling and sometimes nonsense. The example I'll give is the partnerships question. Should I partner with companies to distribute my products? It gives you this nonsense answer. Partnerships can be really valuable for a company because it helps you do blah, blah, blah. But it's like, yeah, go listen to a couple episodes ago where we explained the 10 reasons why partnering with a large partner can be a complete fail. And I cannot get ChatGPT to say that, like to give that list of real, hard, pragmatic truth. I've educated it with RAG. I've given it all sorts of information, and it still wants to talk about how great partnerships are. And so I would encourage you to still find killer executives, killer people with experience, killer advisors, killer coaches who could help you shape the right questions and apply wisdom, not just data and information. And so I just want to make sure that you're balancing your AI euphoria with some gray hair and some experience in the room.
Oh yeah, you absolutely cannot outsource your high-level thinking to the AI. I 100% agree. And there are going to be times, definitely, where you need to hire people, and companies will still get large, right? Humans are really important, but I think it sort of flattens that curve, especially in the early days, right? And your point about not being cheap is well taken as well. And in fact, some of these AI tools are quite expensive, and I would say, well, quite often they're worth spending the money on because the alternative is hiring someone. And, often you can get a lot more bang for your buck from that. But, it's an interesting balance, right? I think I'm definitely seeing startups that can get away with raising less, keeping more of their equity, moving things later while still moving as fast as they can. Because I think maybe the fundamental point is, like in any system, there's always going to be a bottleneck. There's going to be the thing that slows you down. And in the past, that's usually been execution and delivery. I think that can still be the case, but especially at an early stage, the bottleneck is starting to become more often, ideation, discovery, iteration, like that actual high level thinking of figuring out how to get product market fit. The execution bit can be pretty quick, right? And so it's like the resources that you spend, you should be spending more of that, moving that flywheel and getting really good at the ideation and discovery side of things.